we're modelling how do you create solutions. You know, come back to the area of creativity. Creating solutions in the world, I think, is a key skill that isn't taught at school. It's almost discouraged. You know, you're discouraged from getting things wrong or being, you know, going out on a limb. And I think that's the most important trait now. It's almost the courage to be creative, because if, you know, you've seen, I don't know, there's a lot of cowards revealed in the last 5 years, and there's also a lot of heroes emerged, and a lot of warrior mums. You know, I love these, like you guys, like you get there and they just find some power in them that goes, no, not on my watch, not to my kids.
Hello, Quantifolks, and welcome to another episode of Alchemising Education, our little sister podcast of Fark the Shoulds. I am Jodi from QuantiMama.
And I'm Kerri from QuantiMama. Thanks for joining us.
We're delighted to be chatting with Adam Gibson from Parents with Questions, who I think probably was a voice of comfort for many of us in the last 4 years. Adam, we're absolutely thrilled that you're joining us for this conversation of Alchemising Education. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Very nice to join you both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'd love for you to give a synopsis essentially of what Parents with Questions is. The title obviously is fairly self-explanatory, but it was really birthed, you know, a good 4 years ago. I know that you've been a health advocate for, 20 odd years and really passionate about what we put in our bodies, and that obviously feeds through to our kids. But Parents with Questions became this juggernaut that I think you weren't expecting. Is that right?
It was snowballed somewhat. Yeah, it was really it started just as my attempt, and the short version was just my attempt to interrupt the dominant narrative around, safe and effective, take this experimental drug, particularly obviously during the COVID rollout. And I was just, as a parent, I was just horrified that we were going to give a generation of children something that was literally, straight off the shelf experimental, and had every evidence at that point, even then, early on in the adult population, the side effects were so horrendous and so prevalent that no way, we can't give this to a generation of kids. So it was just my attempt to interrupt that, and that was, as you said, a juggernaut. It was a juggernaut. It snowballed into something which was really grassroots. We just gave people, I think, we got censored, and we had limitations on every level. We were up against it on every level. And so we just went back to grassroots, which is giving everyday people tools to have more empowered conversations and tools to do more powerful things, like letterbox drop. They all wanted to go and scream at the world that something was wrong. Well, go and have an intelligent conversation about that. Here's a script on how to do it. Here's some letterbox stuff you can put in your neighbourhood. Here's how you can, organise a community meeting and put some placards up and help wake people up to what's happening. So it was just generally introducing a question and our ability, a reminder to critically think before acting. That was all. And it wasn't,
it's beautifully on theme. Kerri has been Curious Kerri for many years, so she rocks the questions as well. So I think that really resonates for you, doesn't it?
Totally. Yeah, I feel like we've been living in a society where parents are given everything on a plate, and without really thinking about what they're being given. It's similar to, the food that we put on our table. We just don't even think about what's in that food or where it's come from and how long it's been sitting there, and, how long ago it was actually cut and put into a refrigerator before it actually landed on our, supermarkets or wherever it was to then enter the family table. So I'm really big on just asking questions and getting curious about just what does it mean if we take that step or we take that action or we have that thought. We just need to open up our minds to lots of new possibilities, because we've just had it all created for us, and it's not perhaps got it in the right spot.
By convenience to keep us busy and dumb.
Yep.
Yeah, and so the power of just a simple statement like Parents with Questions is, I just think the ripple effect of even those words is incredibly powerful. Yeah. What I was really keen to talk with you about is that obviously you're a father of 3. I've got 4, Kerri's got 2, and so we've all got these families of incredible humans that we are trying to shepherd through the world in what feels like a large degree of uncertainty these days. And I think one of the things that I really love is that are really starting to focus on how to raise incoercible children, whichever. Obviously English is not my forte, but children that can see through the BS and perhaps have a greater connection with their own inner compass. And I would just love to hear what that's like for you with raising your kids in that space whilst navigating institutions, because I think that's a pretty common thing for a lot of parents to try and walk that tightrope.
Yeah, look, it's a big one, and it's not an easy one either for everyone because everyone's got different circumstances, and I'm very aware, single mums or single parents trying to raise kids, it makes it a different thing again. And there's a whole bunch of reasons there, and when two parents have different opinions of what's happening in the world, that can be very hard and so on. But look, the fundamental for me, obviously, is that we look at the institutions we talked about, we've trusted and got to know all our lives and sort of tended to rely upon, like the government and the media and the banking system and the medical system and big pharma and big food. We've realised that none of them should be trusted the way we have always trusted them. To whatever degree, whether you believe in, the lizards are running the world or it's simply just corporate greed, they clearly don't have our best interests at heart. And they're prepared to put profit over people. So in that environment, why the hell would we trust a criminal organisation that is prepared to, let people suffer for the sake of profit? And you can apply that to any industry you want, I guess, in this conversation. So it takes that level of comfort away, and therefore, and that level of, just be compliant, just be comfortable, be, conform with everything. It's like that model no longer applies because it literally can endanger your life.
Yeah.
Like that's how I see it now. It's simple as that. It's like, this can kill you, this stuff. So why the hell would you follow it if it can kill you? And if they clearly don't care about what effect it has on you, beyond a certain level of lip service. So in that environment, that's what we find ourselves raising children in.
Yes.
So my question is, what type of children who do we need to raise in order to not only survive in that, but thrive in it? I don't just want survival for my kids. I want them to have amazing life. The way we've been given that. We've been given a great opportunity to live that way. And I kind of see everything coming down on our generation of kids. So from my point of view as a parent, I go, well, either I do something about it or I'm going to be handing them a big shit sandwich they have to eat themselves.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like that. So it's, my idea around this is like we need to teach kids not to fight the system, but just to have courage again. You can't teach courage as much as model it, but they need to have courage in themselves. They need to have critical thinking versus compliance, and creativity again over conformity. We need to encourage kids to have the courage to be creative, to go and start businesses and get things wrong and make mistakes rather than do as you're told, get a job, put your head down, stay safe, safe and effective, stick your mask on and shut up and do as you're told. That's not a model that is, any way valid anymore. So yeah, that's really where I'm left with is how do we just bring a generation of kids up that have a consciousness around these things that's far greater than ours. That's really, like I always believe you've got to give, X generation, you should give them a better pedestal to stand on. And ideally they can stand on the shoulders of giants as us as the giants. So I want not just my kids, but a generation of kids with a consciousness above ours, because let's be honest, our generation allowed this shit show to happen. And I'm sorry about the language, but it is like it's our responsibility. It's on our comfortable watch. We are all asleep at the wheel, and this stuff has happened under our feet. The food system's poisoned with glyphosate and all the other garbage they put into it. Our kids are becoming sicker. There's a chronic disease crisis that is unbelievable. It's like this is the real pandemic, is the chronic disease in our kids, obesity, diabetes, et cetera. Now there's, kids with vaccine injuries with myocarditis and things. It's outrageous when you really dig into it. And I guess
it's curious we're not outraged by it. And that's something that comes up a lot in our conversations. I find it incredible that we're not outraged. And it must be part of that control mechanism that has a spell on parents to, gaslight concerned family and friends rather than, look at what's in front of them in what seems to be quite an obvious manner.
Yeah, and I kind of think that, as parents, we've given up our own power of, how we raise our kids, because we have given it over to people who we feel have more knowledge. And I wonder what that does to our children when they watch us give up our power as parents in not advocating for our kids, because they learn to not advocate for themselves if we're not advocating for ourselves and for them. So we really do need to be that role model.
It's absolutely, I think, the biggest stumbling block for most people is it requires modelling this stuff. You can't teach someone and say, you kids go be courageous, I'll be a gutless wonder. That doesn't work, and modelling it is tricky, and it takes big decisions and sometimes not easy ones. It's you can't say, oh, well, it's safer to stay in my job and, all that. It's like, maybe you got to take the plunge and go, no, I'm going to cut ties with what it no longer aligns with me. There's some big decisions that need, and it's not about fighting in the street. It's about speaking your truth in front of, I see a lot of parents, they're all on side with this, but they won't speak up in public around what they believe. And I'm like, well, what are you modelling to your kids there?
That's right.
So there's some simple steps you can take, which I think has more, I know there's conversations about schooling and education, but I think that modelling is far more powerful than any school system you can put your kid into, or unschool system or whatever. I think that's the key thing, is be that person and be someone they can, emulate, learn from, later criticise. I'm sure we're getting it all wrong in lots of ways.
No doubt.
Have that sort of foundation of like, well, courage was allowed, and critical thinking was encouraged, and creativity was encouraged, and it was okay to fail, but it was okay to speak my truth. They're the things we want our kids to know, right? Because I always remember during the pandemic, everyone said, "Oh, if everyone just stood up and said no thanks, it would all go away," which is true. But that's not going to happen in our generation, because we're all too bloody brainwashed and comfortable and all the rest of it. But we can encourage that in our next generation. And I think that's what I see, is that the opportunity is for us is to do our kids, hey, you never have to do what you don't want to do again, because you get an opportunity to stand up and do something about it. And that's not because you're angry, it's just because you know yourself. That's sovereignty. That's like, I know my body. I don't need this shit you want to put into me. No, thank you. It's really powerful.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a challenge to live with, though, as you're raising those souls, though, because we often talk about Quanti 4, who has come in fierce like that. It just is in every cell of his body. He doesn't know how to be coerced. He just
no.
I used to joke about the fact that I'd break my kid's spirit so that way I could get on with the parenting job, and he just came in and went, no thanks. And so it's interesting on a day-by-day basis going, okay, the long game is that, we are raising this child that, we'll be able to say no quite confidently.
Yes.
But really, the daytime stuff that
the practical day-to-day is not easy. Yeah, because we've got our own programs, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've got our own programs that we need to sort of unravel or leave behind, kind of like a backpack on the path. We just have all these little things in our backpack that we're used to, that we're comfortable with, that we know, and to sort of try and leave those behind and create the new is really the only way forward. It's really we can't look behind.
Yeah,
we can learn from looking behind, but we have to find a way to just create the new, and that's really scary because we've become very comfortable, very, very comfortable in a life of convenience.
Absolutely. So how do you support parents to find those questions, Adam? Have you got a framework that helps people start asking questions when they don't know where to start?
Look, it's I think question everything is a framework. It's like us, but to be fair, look, Parents of Questions is we're not out there campaigning against anything anymore. Really, what it's shifted to be, the framework is this, is we're now rebranded this as what the word you used before, uncoercible. And that's not actually a word. It's something I made. It came out my mouth during a Zoom call during the thing, but I just as stuck, right? And uncoercible is like literally, you just can't tell me what to do unless I agree to it. It's simple as that. It's not an argumentative thing, but and the framework I think, is around building foundation, and that's the foundation. The bottom of the foundation, it's sort of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. It's like first have natural immunity and health sorted. If we've got our health, we've got we're kind of grounded in good decision making and vitality and so on. We're not stuck into a medical system. And the second part of it, the second layer of it, I think, is have as much as possible a financial foundation and some financial sovereignty where you're not, and that can mean either have a savings account or simplify life so you don't need as much money, or it might mean, have a side hustle so you don't feel as reliant on a job that can tell you what to do. Let's have some financial sovereignty and a plan at least. And then have a community around, fly with other eagles, have people around that encourage this conversation and encourage or indulge in critical thinking and courageous behavior and find other people who model the behavior you want your kids to model. They can model from the village as well as us, right? And then, that the next layer up is raising lions and bringing that level of, educational awareness and alternatives, and at least make our kids aware of what the indoctrination looks like so they can deal with it. And then, on the top of that pyramid is the ability then, I think, for a generation to really, Maslow called it self-actualization. I call it finding yourself and living your best life and having a conscious connection to something greater. So I think that's a long answer, but really it's about building those foundations in our families and in our communities in a positive way that gives us sort of almost, it's not like someone saying, here, you're allowed to speak up now. It's like, here's all the foundations of your life sorted. Here's the strength you've just always knew you had. Like mum's lifting the bus off the kid when they needed to. And all that. Same deal. We've got that strength there. We just need to be reminded of it gently to go, look, got some foundations around. There's a plan in place. I've got some like-minded friends around who feel the same way. And, courage is gained that way rather than in not necessarily in big lightning bolts. It's in incremental steps and building foundations.
Sustainable change.
The question. Yeah. So it's about realizing that, as you guys said early on in the piece, so what we know to be comfortable with is no longer valid. Therefore, we've got to start again and start from scratch. And okay, what are we going to throw out? What are we going to keep? And from that place, sort of critical thinking and self-awareness for parents and for all of us, I think, becomes naturally. It's not a big leap then. It's like, it's just naturally part of our lives because we question all of our lives. Finances,
Absolutely.
health, all of it. Let's think about the friends we have around, the people we're around, and the conversations we have, and all that. So that's what gives us courage to keep moving forward.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be as simple as how we spend our downtime and how we model that. And I resonate with everything you're saying. And I think that sort of happened organically for us. Like, I tend to say that the last 4 years were a real gift because they really, they revealed the dimmer switch that was on our lives everywhere, and so then I got to choose to turn that dimmer switch back up to bring life back into its full glory, say, for want of a better term. But the flow-on effect is obviously for the kids. And it's funny because I still have conversations with people and they just go, I couldn't do what you do. And I'm like, I just started with one decision, and it's that foundational stuff. But it just must look like a mountain to people, like they can't even fathom how life would look. And I know that exactly as you say, there are always these mitigating, I don't know if there's circumstances, but, people's lifestyles, whether they're, as you say, single parents with different ideas on how to raise their kids, or estranged families. But I kind of think that there are always those difficulties in everyone's family, no matter what, even like in mine that looks relatively, harmonious, even though, I do joke about drinking at midday. But, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I get it entirely.
That's the reality.
It's the daily grind. But it is like that idea of creating foundation is so potent, and that's where the access is. You just start with one and then you make a decision that kind of honors that, don't you? I'm so curious about how, because your kids are in school, right? So, and this is something I toy with and I offer my kids as well. And the thing that kind of makes me not offer it too much is probably what I imagine you're facing, which is the daily negotiation of how kids become or continue to be uncoercible within the school system, and do they get to exercise their nose, or do they make peace with that, and what that's like as a parent? Like, how is that for you?
Yeah, it's all brand new for me at the moment because we've been homeschooling for 5 years and had a very different, so our kids have had a very lucky. It's been very traumatic for them in some ways, being dragged out of a school they loved. They're in a Steiner school, and then they went to all these homeschool pods, and it's a hard journey because a lot of parents started off very committed and then they dropped off, and so we've had this patchy sort of 5 years. And long story short, they've gone back into school in its early days. But I think for me personally, having had that time away from it all, has them naturally question everything they're going through now. They're going, why are all the kids eating white bread for breakfast?
Yeah.
White bread and jam and margarine for breakfast. Like, what the hell's that? They come away, they say that to me, not the other way around. They go, don't people know how unhealthy that stuff is? And I guess my oldest girl looks at other kids on social media, and she's not. She's been off screens basically all her life. And she goes, Dad, they're really unhappy and miserable all the time, and they don't have any social skills. And she kind of notices. So I guess it sounds a bit judgmental, I know, and I'm cautious of that, but they notice where the indoctrination and the normal looks wrong. They go, wow, why would you do that? And I think that's just having that time away from it. So I know that's not an answer that everyone can do. But, again, it's questioning too. And they go home and go, such and such did this. And I go, what do you think about that? What do you reckon's motivating them? And, what do you think that teacher really means by that? Or, it's allowing them to come to their own conclusions, because who knows, whatever I say isn't going to make much difference. But what I ask of them, they'll come to answers that mean something for them.
Yeah.
So, it's a tricky. It is tricky.
It's interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, it's interesting. In a way, I see that you've given your girls a real gift, because you've given them the experience of both. And I know that with my kids, and sorry, your girls will get to see the two differences, and they'll kind of go, oh, they get to come to their own decision, as you said. I know with my son, I raised them on really good food for many, many years. And now that they're like teenagers, or 18 and 20, you kind of go, he comes home with a pizza and he's, for dinner, and I've got dinner on the table. It's like, what are you doing, mate? And he says things like, well, it's okay, Mum, because, I know what good food is. I know what eating healthy is. You've given me all of that. Now I just kind of need to test what it feels like to have the other. So, we're sort of creating that opportunity for them to sort of see both sides, so that we're not indoctrinating them into one way either. So we're sort of trying to keep them open-minded to the fact that there are different ways. People do live differently, and they can make their own choices. They just have to be happy with what they make, and they need to know that they're in control of their own choices. So, in a way, Adam, you've actually given your girls a real gift by, at the age that they're at now, that they're older, to be able to see both sides, and to then open up those opportunities for conversations when they come home. I mean, that's priceless. That's where, as parents, we love to have these conversations and to help them come up with their own, form their own opinions and their own ideas and their own desires. So, I know that some parents, we often say that, you can change your mind. You don't have to homeschool. You can do half and half. You can make it any way that suits you and your family's needs. We just need to be creative ourselves. And it goes back to us demonstrating as parents how to live life to the fullest. And sometimes it's going to be hard, and sometimes we're going to get the decisions wrong. But, we just got to try different things and figure it out for ourselves. So that's what I think, you've created for your girls, and the opportunity to really, continue, questioning it. So I think it's a gift.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I agree. And look, I think something you said I want to comment on. I think a lot of, homeschooling is not, as you guys know better than ever, it's not easy necessarily. And taking that leap away from the mainstream is it's a big step,
Yeah.
look, for me personally, it was a simple one insofar as the school couldn't guarantee that there'd be no COVID jab bus turning up.
Yep.
And I went, well, they're not going. Simple as that. They're gone, So it's straightforward in that regard. But then, of course, it opens a can of worms of what's next. And so we started a number of little homeschool pods, and my wife particularly, I shouldn't say we, because she did most of it. We got new things happening. It's like-minded families, and there was a lot of effort going towards it, and money too. It costs a lot of money to get it going and so on. But I guess that's the point. It's like we're modeling how do you create solutions. Come back to the area of creativity. Creating solutions in the world, I think, is a key skill that isn't taught at school. It's almost discouraged. You're discouraged from getting things wrong or being, going out on a limb. And I think that's the most important trait now. It's almost the courage to be creative, because if you've seen, I don't know, there's a lot of cowards revealed in the last 5 years, and there's also a lot of heroes emerged, and a lot of warrior mums. I love these, like you guys, like you get there and they just find some power in them that goes, no, not on my watch, not to my kids.
Yeah.
And they'll go out and start a school. Like people say to me, oh, there's no homeschool in my area. So go start one. That's what is needed now, is people to stand up and go and have a go at something themselves and be the leader, be the change. It's a cliche, but be the change. Because that's really what I think the kids are going to need, is that ability to go, you know what, I don't see a solution for this in the world, therefore I'll go make it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we really do. And that goes back to that modelling again, doesn't it? We really need to model that for them so that they know it's safe to do that, and it's safe to go out and test new waters and to try new things, and that, it may not work the first time, but, we just keep trying because we believe in that vision of what we want for them and their future. And we know that the current environment, perhaps kids aren't thriving in, that they might be surviving in, and they might be doing okay. But as you said before, you want to raise your lionesses to, thrive. And I think that's definitely what Jodes and I want for our kids as well. So it's about just, creating that for them and demonstrating that to them.
Well, I mean, there's something else to do with alchemizing education. I think it's really important to pick up on, and that is we're not against kids learning per se and learning in schools, but I think what has emerged, and this is the real gift of the last 5 years, is that the school institutions as they were set up don't encourage those things that you've said, exactly that, right? And there is enough of a shit show going on out there that we do need the courage to be creative, and that will feel incredibly lonely, because when you are doing that, you'll be the only one showing up in that creative space, right? Because that's the whole point of creativity, is you create something that you create it into existence because you see the need for it. And that, I think that's where I kind of got offended that we all forgot to check that the institutions that we were giving our children to were conducting themselves in a becoming manner. And because, as you say, it's our generation that dropped the ball, it then became this thing where we just want to send the kids off but not discuss the fact that perhaps it's not actually meeting their needs and allowing them to thrive, exactly as you say. I think there's a potential for kids to thrive in school, but overall, I don't see it. I actually, exactly as you say, I keep seeing these kids that are so emotionally, maybe juvenile is a word for it. It's like they don't have a resilience. There's this pretend resilience where you keep putting them into a traumatic situation and they learn to cope with it, but that's not resilience. Yeah. So I think this is where they're really interesting conversations, and I love the fact that what you did was you snowballed into a movement where people have the courage to even ask, which is the first step. They must look at their current situation and go, hang on, there's something NQR here, and do I have an opinion? And one of the things that I once got gifted, which I love, which is very much along the lines of what you were talking about, is anything less than a yes is a no. And I I've used that for my kids because it makes it easier for them to discern what their answer is. They get a clear yes, and anything else is it's a no to that right there and then. And it's a great framework for them. So yeah, I just I'm excited that we're here.
Gives them permission to pursue the yes as well. That's the other part of it. It's like when something's, you get that full body yes. It's like, well, go do it, go pursue it. With all don't let anything hold you back.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there, Jodi, but it's one thing you said, Kerri, too, which I think is interesting, is that I actually believe that letting everything be safe for the kids now is a problem. I think that's part of our conditioning, is everyone's got to be safe, and it's got to be an easy road, and it's got to be convenient, and it's like, who cares about safe sometimes? I mean, my kids run around with bloody knives and climb big trees and ride big horses and do all sorts of neck breaking type activities, and it makes me nervous as a parent sometimes, but also gives them, I did all that stuff. We all survived it, or most of us did. It's I know it's a bit old school to say it, but like, kids need to get dirty and a bit dangerous and try things sometimes, and it's a good thing. It's not about being safe. And
it's the point of being here. Like the very notion that we are here to live a life that is safe and effective is like the ultimate gaslight, right? Because we're here actually, we're here for the bruises and bumps, and I've said this before, I will encourage my kids to do stuff that, does test the boundaries of physics, but technically that is learning as well. But more than that, they're here for that. I don't want to put them in danger, but I don't want them to live a bubble-wrapped life where they, leave home at 20 and don't know how to navigate the first pedestrian crossing they come to.
Yeah, I've all my years of coaching clients and people in the fitness, and thousands and thousands of coaching clients. And one of the most common things I kept coming back to with people when they're complaining about the bumps as they go through them is like, we don't line up. No one lines up to go on flat roller coasters.
No.
We're there for the fun. We want the ride. We want to see the ups and downs, and that's what life's about. And I agree. We've had this sort of sanitized, almost domesticated version of life presented to us now, which is what's I think, much as there's some great teachers out there, but school is about giving kids a really sanitized little do as you're told, stay in line, be a bit bored all your life. I mean, who really wants that? I want adventure, and I want my kids to have that.
Yeah.
And I love that concept that you said about the pyramid, though, because all of those skill sets within that pyramid, you just kind of wonder how much of that do they really learn at school versus how much do they learn through us. And I know I'm going through an exercise at the moment with my daughter around budgeting, and, just what she's gaining through that basic life experience, that's empowering her so that she doesn't get into a position in years to come where she's trapped in a job that she doesn't love because she's got a mortgage, she's got kids at school. She can actually be, as you mentioned, that financial sovereignty to be able to make your own choices along the way. So that I really love that, hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just remembering that they're the skills we need to give our kids.
Yeah, we just need to reassess what it is to actually make it work in this world. So much juice. I think just who you represent for parents is just so powerful, Adam, because you are an example of someone who's asked questions and, is clearly still thriving. And we hope to be that example for people too, that not that it's impossible, but actually you can take the first step, and it might be ugly, it might be in the unknown, but you'll end up somewhere different, and that's the most powerful thing. I'm so grateful for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely to chat. It's a big topic. We could talk about it all day, I know, but it's it's a big one for all of us now. We want to set up our kids to have a life that's far more adventurous and more fulfilling and more conscious and wonderful than ours. It's my wish.
Oh, we'll call that a prayer for today. And can I just say, I would be the first one to order a T-shirt that says "No one lines up for a flat roller coaster."
All right, I'll keep that in mind.
Oh, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fantastic conversation. Where can people find you?
Look, there's a podcast called Parents with Questions, which is on all the podcast channels, and that is our main site now is called Uncoercible.com. So it's with UN, uncoercible.com. Join up there, and we have a range of master classes and different offerings there around that pyramid I talked about between health and financial sovereignty and attracting a good community, flying with eagles, around raising lions and alternative education, and around consciousness and around how do we grow and expand in that space. So it's a very broad conversation, but it's all based around empowering families to have the life we want for our kids and for ourselves.
I love it. So for the folks out there, start by making that first step to ask questions. We'll put all the links for Adam's fantastic offerings there, and just know, Quanta folks, that you are supported to ask questions. So do it. We can't wait to talk with you again. Hey, Quanta folks. The conversations that we have about alchemising education are underpinned by our amazing Take the Leap course for parents, which is all about deschooling the parents. If you're keen to deep dive more, then check out the QuantiMama.com website and find the Take the Leap course. This course is beautiful because it will give you an opportunity to examine where your programs are, where you're creating limiting beliefs and expectations for your child, and it ultimately frees you to be the best advocate for your child that you can be, and that's all of us can ever want for our children, just to love, nurture and watch them become the most incredible individuals that we already know them to be. So more info, head to QuantiMama.com.